So let me, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Sarah Jones. I'm the Secretary for CDAF, and I'm on behalf of Joan, who is the chair. She has asked me to lead the meeting today because unfortunately she's currently in an Athena Swan meeting. She'll be joining us in a while, but she's asked me to sort of take the reins to start with in this particular session. So it is with great pleasure that I thank you all for joining us, and it's lovely to see some there's lots of names I recognise, and it is very refreshing to see people on camera and to see faces as well. So that's a treat for a Friday. We now have a quiet Friday in my university where we're not meant to have meetings and things. So it's nice to be able to see a few faces, etc. as well. So thank you all for joining us, and I'm looking forward to a very interesting session. I think we all have our concerns about the way forward, not just from the teaching perspective, but in terms of this subject of today's meeting, in terms of how do we replace some of the lost business and how do we drive that forward in the current climate. So I'm looking forward to hearing our guest speakers, and in terms of sort of just a bit of an agenda for today, so that you know what's coming. We're going to welcome Terry Hodgetts, who's the Director of Corporate Client Solutions at Aston University. He'll be up first, and he'll give us probably about a 20-minute talk on his area, and then we'll have some time for questions and answers. And then after that, we will be listening to Professor Gillian Armstrong, who's Director of Business Engagement at Ulster University Business School. And again, Gillian will have the floor for about 20 minutes, but again, there is flexibility in that, and then obviously some time for questions and answers after that. There will be a bit of an open forum, and we can take in that open forum, questions and answers. If people need to step away for a comfort break at that particular point, there is time to do so. And then finally, our third guest speaker is Louise McAlinden from ACCA, and again she'll have about 20 minutes, around about 1:30ish. Again, some questions and answers at the end, and we're looking to draw it all to a close at 2:00. So that's the schedule, and I apologise if, like me, you've had to have an early lunch, or your stomach is going to rumble because you haven't yet had lunch. But please, I hope you enjoy the session, and therefore I would ask Terry to take the floor, please. Terry from Aston University.
Hi everybody, good afternoon. Yes, I'm Terry Hodgetts from Aston University, and I've been asked to share some thoughts on the market for accounting training and what we can provide for business and some of the challenges facing us. I have some slides I'm going to share with you, and I'll apologise in advance in the spirit of Mark Twain. I'm sorry for the length of the slides, but I didn't have time to write a shorter presentation. So fingers crossed, they're quite wordy, but I kind of, once I start thinking about these things, lots of things pop into my head and lots of issues come up for me to want to talk about. So let me see if I can get this working. So can I just check that everybody can see this screen okay?
Yeah,
yes,
we can see that, Terry.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Right, so a little bit about me first, a bit of background. I started life in computer sales many years ago, and then moved into OD and started getting involved in executive education in the early 90s, including spending an awful lot of money with Cranfield in their day. And as a result of various experiences, I ended up kind of in a portfolio career where I was doing some associate tutoring work for Aston, running some leadership workshops, helping them with bids and so on, which over time, I guess I'm just the living proof that if you stick around at places, people ask you to do stuff. So over the years, my role has expanded into, a more of a full-time exec ed role, then running that department, and now overseeing the apprenticeship side of things as well from a central university perspective. I personally generated around £9 million of commercial training business for the university, And in terms of the total value of business that we're overseeing, if we include the apprenticeship programs and the CPD stuff and everything else, we're into the tens of millions that we've been operating over the last few years. I am not an accountant, but I have been involved previously, kind of as a teaching assistant in some of our workshops and supporting some of our work, particularly with gamification and simulations. So I'll try and share that experience as I go through. So, and I welcome sort of questions or if people want to chip in as we go through with this, but I'm conscious of time as well. I'll try and keep to the time so that I'm not holding everybody up or overrunning. So the first thing I think I should say is that from my perspective, accountancy training for managers is probably the biggest training need in business in the UK. People like to talk about the sexy stuff about strategy and thinking about digitization and competing in the virtual world, but there's a functional, fundamental requirement that is a consistent challenge in organizations. And I see this time and time again in the clients that we work with and in the conversations that we have. Most business managers are uncomfortable managing their own budgets and in many cases can't decipher their budget reports. They're not helped by their own accounting departments that have red, green and black color coding and brackets and not brackets and all sorts of strange reporting formats that make the data excellent for consolidation at an institutional level, but completely hopeless from a practical management perspective for individual departments. So making sense of the information that they've got is often a challenge. They don't really understand their report and accounts. They're not very clear on why certain things go into a P&L, why certain things go into a cash flow forecast, why certain things go into a balance sheet and how these things go together. So they're not comfortable with the language of this. When they're making business cases for investment or whatever else, they struggle with investment appraisal. So they're leaning very heavily on their management accountant to help them, but they often don't know the intelligent questions they should be asking their management accountant in order to do that job effectively. And of course, as with so many professional occupations, you guys have your own professional language, which makes perfect sense to you, but doesn't necessarily always scan intuitively for line managers who are not professional specialists in their own right. So there is, I think, an enormous market out there. And there are a plethora of accounting firms, specialist training providers, many of which are a lot less specialist than they would claim, and universities who are seeking to meet this requirement and who do it to a greater or lesser extent and a greater or lesser quality measure. But there are also some challenges with this. Delivering to business managers, they're different. They're not students. And there are lots of things we need to bear in mind. The first is that they're easily distracted and bored. Now, we can argue that students are easily distracted and bored as well, and they certainly are. But it's a particular challenge in our experience, dealing with managers, keeping them engaged and helping them to understand the value and the applicability of what's being covered for them. They've got a real focus on the practicality of the tools that they can use. And they respond much better to coaching and facilitation rather than traditional didactic teaching styles. They want the content to be relevant to their business. So it isn't good enough just talking in general terms about these sorts of concepts. We need to be drilling down into what does this mean for me? What are we doing in my organization and how are we applying these tools in my organization? They are typically time poor. Now, this is particularly the case in small businesses, and we've got a lot of experience at Aston in delivering small business programs through our Centre for Growth. And of course, the challenge in small businesses is that they actually can't afford the time away from work in many cases. They don't have the staff, they don't have the cover. But even if they can, it's maybe half a day at a time. So it tends to be sort of high impact, short duration sessions that these people are looking for. And we also sometimes, not often, but sometimes you will get a hostage in a room. Somebody who's been told to attend because their manager thought it was a good idea. They don't really think they need to be there. They don't know why they're there. They're on a program like this. And that can present specific challenges in terms of them infecting the mood and the sort of the operation of the rest of the room around them. And you're also dealing with decision makers and gatekeepers. In a traditional university environment, the student is selecting the university. They're deciding which university they want to go to. They're deciding which program they want to go on. But in this marketplace, the HR department, the training function, the CFO, a division head, a line manager, various other people are going to be involved. They're going to be involved in the decision. They may be making the decision. And so it's important to keep in mind that they need to be satisfied. And just as an aside, you also need to be efficient and customer focused in the way that you invoice and process payments. And in my experience, naming no names, universities generally aren't very good at this. They're not very organized, they're not very responsive, and they're not very effective at doing these kinds of things. Now, there are kind of two drivers for the accounting training. The one is the business driver, the identification of a talent need through performance reviews, through broader talent strategies, perhaps. If it's a talent issue, the organization is probably thinking more widely than just the accounting training and the competency to sort of manage budgets and put plans together and investment appraise and all the rest of it. But the business driver does drive demand for open programs as well as in-company delivery. And here, the value of your contacts and networks and relationships is absolutely vital. The first question I would ask, if you're thinking about engaging in this sort of work, is who do you know? Who can you promote it to? Who can you have conversations with about this sort of thing? But it's also important, if you're thinking about getting involved in serving this business and serving this marketplace, that you try to secure some business-to-business marketing support to help you. Because getting heard above the noise, getting noticed amongst this huge marketplace of training providers is difficult. And that there's an awful lot of competition out there that you need to differentiate yourself against. The individual driver is a little bit different. Because individuals, if they're motivated and keen, will probably do a few Google searches. They might have a preference for a particular university or whatever, and therefore it's very important to have a strong web presence so that people can find you to help to drive inquiries. There's a lot of training organizations out there, and a lot of universities in the past have published or advertised open enrollment programs to the marketplace purely as a switch selling solution. So they encourage people to inquire, and then they tell people, yes, the bookings are low, this program probably isn't going to run, and they try and switch sell them into, if you could get a few more colleagues, we could do something just for you. I think there are some accounting training companies that have largely run their business on that basis over the last few years, offering open programs that don't run, and then switching it into trying to get businesses to book a number of managers onto the program. And I'd like to think for a moment about the different markets that you've got, because a lot of people get very excited about online delivery, and there's been lots of discussions, certainly at Aston, and I'm sure in other institutions as well. This market has grown explosively over the last few years. There's a load of providers out there offering a wide variety of solutions. But there are a few things to think about if you're thinking of getting into online. The first is that while the standards vary, you need high production values to be effective in this market. It isn't enough just to record some videos or do some slide casts. You really need to think about what you're doing with the technology, what you're doing with the content, what the skills of your delivery resources are to use that technology effectively, how you can integrate bite-sized chunks of video and other learning capabilities, what you might do in a synchronous environment in terms of breakout groups, group activities, and so on to make this work effectively. So it does require investment up front, and you need to factor in the cost and time to do that, even if you're repurposing existing content. There is still some free content out in the marketplace, and there's some loss leader offers in the market. But from what I'm seeing, that's becoming less and less. And when we look at the likes of Coursera and edX and all the rest of it, it started out with predominantly American universities offering lots of free content to build their brand and to build their brand loyalty in the market. They've got people hooked now, so now they can start charging them if people want to keep doing it. And over time, I think we're going to see that increasingly being the case. But again, you can only really charge people if you're putting quality content out there. And it is a very price-sensitive market in many cases. This does need significant effort in marketing. So if you do want to drive demand on this, you need marketing support in terms of social media, web content, search engine optimization, getting opinion pieces and advice articles out there, and you will need support to do that. It's not enough just to put it in place and expect it to happen. You've then got the open workshop market. And again, there are lots and lots of providers doing this. And it takes time as a rule to build a successful operation and to run it profitably. The CMED organization, which is the US-based executive development sort of big university body, has a view that it should take about 5 years before you can make a profit from an open programs operation. If you want to dip a toe in the water, then it's a good thing to do, but be careful that you manage expectations. I've had many lovely conversations over the years with colleagues in the business school at Aston who think if we build it, they will come. All we need to do is schedule some workshops and book a training room, and we'll have people queuing around the block to come and attend. And it doesn't work like that. It's hard work to get people booked on and to encourage people to spend their money with you. So you will need marketing support. You'll need help in generating content, getting things noticed. Local business publications, that sort of thing can help a lot. And if you're on LinkedIn, you can use LinkedIn and put lots of posts out there to get people involved. If you've got the option of leveraging some institutional business development support, maybe you've got some account management function in the university, maybe you've got some people who are working on knowledge transfer partnerships or supporting placement activities or whatever else. And if you can get them to help you by just sharing some of this work and making it more visible, then that can help a great deal. There's a specific market for in-company training. And there are lots of particularly larger businesses out there that up until lockdown hit us were more than happy to spend quite a significant amount of money engaging universities to train their managers. And this can be a very successful and quite high margin operation if you get it right. But you do need dedicated account management to do this. So if you want to get this started, you need to factor this activity into your load model. It's not just a question of adding it to the day job and having a few phone calls. It takes serious work in terms of conversations and program design and proposals and all the rest of it to get to that point. The in-company market demands a more focused approach. So you need to be using the client's financial reports and ideally their competitors' financial reports and customize your delivery to their business. We often share with our clients the fact that for many years we used to deliver finance training to Gillian, and we tend not to say it too much nowadays since Gillian went under. But it is interesting that over the course of the last 10 years, every year we were running sessions and pointing out to Gillian that they were slowly going bust, essentially running a Ponzi scheme the way that they were running their contracts, while their auditors were continuing blissfully signing off their annual accounts and nobody was paying any attention to it. Having that business-focused approach and encouraging the client to actually use this workshop on their material and their content is really, really valuable. It's also really valuable to throw away the Harvard case study method. Use the client as the case study. Work with their issues, their problems, their challenges, their case studies as much as possible. And if you can possibly do it, get an executive sponsor involved. Because if you can get the CFO or somebody like that to spend an hour with you to give you the context and the issues up front and help to shape it, and then to be involved during the workshop, do a Q&A or a presentation, that really adds value to the experience. The group in the room will really buy into this and make it happen. And the other thing to bear in mind is think about what you're going to do in terms of the broader experience in socializing and mingling, because that's a very, very powerful part of the offer. and it makes a huge difference in terms of the brand value, the perceived value of what you're doing with these companies. It gives you a chance to network with decision makers. It gives you a chance to have a nice off-the-record conversation with participants and see how they're doing. It gives you a chance to open up other business opportunities and to on-sell and to make other things happen. And don't be nervous about doing irrelevant, silly, frivolous things, because quite often the more frivolous the activity, the more of a signature experience it becomes, and the more it ties people into that thing, and you know, they're encouraged to promote this internally in the business and sell it to other people as well. So, and you know, I've just given you a few examples of the sorts of things that we've done over the years, and that's just a small selection. But don't be afraid to do something interesting, innovative, completely unrelated to business as part of that overall experience if you get the chance. Few points to think about in terms of learning and teaching, and I'll keep this at a very high level, but I'd welcome any thoughts or discussions about this. The first thing to bear in mind is the group is not preparing for an assessment. So it is very much about convincing the audience they're going to get something practical out of it. So forget case studies, forget textbooks, forget journal articles. News stories, topical cases are much more valuable, and their own experience, their own reports. Use the room a lot more. It's better to encourage engagement, to challenge the group, to facilitate, to get them to answer their own questions, rather than to be the professor at the front of the room, you know, giving the pearls of wisdom to them. If at all possible, get into the idea of using gamification and simulations to provide a way of connecting that experience together. This has been absolutely transformative for us over the last 10 years or so. We started off using a business simulation as an idea of developing it as a kind of a capstone experience that could help to draw together the threads of how to connect the implications of strategic decisions with the operational impacts and what that does for our, you know, potential for our marketing budget and the impact on the share price and all the rest of it. So on most of our workshops now, we have people running simulated businesses in a competitive environment and working against each other to try and get the best share price, the best business results, the most sustainable business outcomes, and all the rest of it. This is a really, really valuable tool to use, and it does completely transform the activity. And it also has the benefit that you have to prepare a much smaller amount of slideware and teaching materials and resources because it's activity driven and activity based throughout. The one thing I would stress, though, there are lots of simulation packages out there, and a lot of them sell themselves about having these wonderful user interfaces and a fantastic look and feel and a real high-tech thing, and it's all cloud hosted and it looks brilliant. But the danger of that is that you end up with a group of people sitting around a laptop screen, constantly inputting different numbers and doing loads of what ifs and iterative goes at, well, let's see if we cut our research and development investment by 20%, what happens? And if we increase our price by 5%, what happens? They're not analyzing and decision making in that environment. They're just crunching numbers. So try to get them to focus on the outputs of the reports and diagnostic discussions about what these reports mean and what they need to do with it as a result, because that's the process that really adds value for them. And the other thing in terms of the delivery of these programs is to make sure that you're focusing on learning outcomes and to engage heavily in the feedback process. And, you know, I might be teaching you the obvious here, but I like to reinforce it because we have to, with our colleagues, reinforce this quite often. So at the opening of whatever workshop you're running, spend 15 minutes with the group asking for their key learning needs. Encourage them to share with you. What do they not understand? What are they nervous about? What do they have difficulty with? Capture it on a flip chart and keep that flip chart somewhere safe. Reinforce through that process what you will be covering in the workshop. And if they're asking questions that's not part of the workshop content, be clear that that's not part of the workshop content. But if you've got the chance to spend half an hour with somebody over lunchtime or do a little bit of work at the close of the day just to give them a little bit of extra help, then again, that's going to add to their satisfaction. But then the critical point at the end of the workshop Go and get that flip chart out and tick the things off the list. Reinforce to the people, you asked us to cover this and we covered it. Are you happy? And go through that and get the people in the room to explicitly confirm, yes, this is what I wanted. Yes, this is what I got. There's some deep-seated psychology at play in this, that when you get people to actually commit and publicly commit to this, it changes their behavior. They're more likely to give you positive feedback. They're more likely to recommend you to their colleagues. They're more likely to share a positive experience as a result of it. And that helps both in terms of your feedback and results and in terms of driving business to help you to generate more going forwards. So that is a short stream of consciousness. And that's about as much as I wanted to cover in terms of a presentation as such. So I'm happy to open the floor up to questions at this point.
Thank you very much, Terry. That was very interesting. As he says, open the floor. Has anybody got any questions that they'd like to ask?
I'll start off with a question, if I may. Sorry for just butting in, but I can't work out how to raise my hand. I'm sure I've done it once before, but I can't work it out now. So, Terry, it's a question really based on your experience. One of the challenges that we've had in developing any sort of executive education is that the university wants to apply all its standard policies and procedures to that, even when they've been written with full-time undergraduates in mind. And I'm sure that's not a unique experience. I wondered if you could share any tips on how best to deal with that, or any ingenious routes around that you may have found in your experience.
Are we under Chatham House rules?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it is a constant challenge. And since I've become responsible for our apprenticeships portfolio, that challenge has increased exponentially for me. Because academic regulations and quality procedures are vitally important and absolutely essential. But at the same time, they are extremely inflexible. And we do need to be very focused on what is actually going to work for the marketplace. In simple terms, if it's not qualification bearing, and most of this stuff isn't, then my approach has been to largely ignore the academic regs, because we're not dealing with a qualification. It doesn't really come under the QAA or anything else, although I'm getting a bit nervous that it might come under Ofsted under these new regimes. But it's about having the conversations about being fit for purpose, and it's about, in some cases, engaging with the quality process to support that process enough and be compliant enough whilst allowing for wiggle room. The history of Aston over the last 15 years or so is replete with examples of me being hauled over the coals in quality committees. It happens. It's difficult to respond at commercial pace when you have to go through all of these approval processes. So as much as you can get set up front as possible is very important and very valuable. But yeah, it's a constant challenge. The commercial business market is a very, very different market. The timescales that you're working to, the staffing of the programs, just simple things like timetabling and scheduling, for example. When we have a program that is committed to an external client that we've maybe had in the books for 18 months, scheduled in, conference center books, all of the other ancillary activities that go along with it. And then suddenly at 2 weeks' notice, there's a decision about our traditional on-campus teaching that shuffles some schedules around, and we're told, oh, you can't have that faculty member on that day. It creates some creative tension for us. And I'm not going to say we have all the answers. In fact, I think in the current climate, it has become more difficult to manage these sorts of things, because in the COVID world, there are so many things for the university to deal with and to manage that it makes it all the more difficult. Sorry, this is becoming a very rambly answer. I have a habit of doing.
It's very useful actually to get the benefit of your experience there, and certainly we've done similar things. We've kind of flown stuff beneath the radar a little bit, but that probably makes it sound worse than it is. Actually, one thing we did do that worked is that we made sure that when we first got into even doing things like an MBA or a DBA, which was a new area for us because we traditionally just done undergraduate teaching, we made sure that the person responsible for that course actually had some quality experience. That it was a previous head of quality, and which meant not just that they knew some of the loopholes, but also they had the trust and the respect of the team that would be dragging them into a meeting, telling them off if they'd done something wrong. So in a sense, they could create that more cooperative relationship with the gamekeepers.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And, a couple of things come to mind. The first thing is, don't underestimate also the challenge of getting the right faculty member in the room, somebody with the right skill set and the right approach. Universities are full of people who are excellent researchers who shouldn't be put in front of a room full of paying managers as long as they have a pulse, frankly. You need the right sort of behavior set. You need the right sort of teaching style. You need people who are comfortable going off piste a bit and being flexible. And if there's an interesting question that isn't part of the teaching plan, it's okay to spend a bit of time on the interesting question. I've heard horror stories occasionally, even from our own MBA program, and most of the time it goes pretty well. But one example was a discussion a couple of years ago that I heard about, where the group was getting very agitated and very excited about a specific business issue in the room, and they wanted to engage in this and get into the discussion about it. And one of the people put their hand up and said, "I'm facing this challenge in my business." Now, this was on an MBA program, which one would hope would be a bit more practically focused than potentially some of the other undergraduate, postgraduate stuff. So I'm facing this issue in my business. I'm interested in what to do about it. The faculty member's answer was, "I'm sorry, I can't help you with that." And they just moved on. All they had to do was to say, "Oh, that's interesting. What does everybody else think?" You could have had a really fun 15 minutes, bounce things around. Everybody would have been satisfied. Everybody would have woken up, and the whole thing would have been better. But it's just, there are a lot of people in universities that are absolutely locked into this didactic, I've got a slide deck and come hell or high water, I'm going to go through it sort of approach. So it's getting the right people to deliver. It's getting a recognition that the structure and the shape and the content is different. It's getting a recognition that the speed for development is different. If you're doing these things, they're not qualification bearing. You don't need an external examiner. You don't need a quality process. You need an end client to say, "Yes, that's what we want." And that's basically it. And then you go and do it. I'm having some debates with colleagues at the moment, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with the senior leader standard under the apprenticeship levy. So lots of universities offering MBAs and MScs under the senior leader standard, and the government's got a bit fed up with this. So they've said, "We're taking the master's qualification out of it, so you've got to come up with another solution." So like most universities, I think we're going to end up offering a PG dip or similar, and then an option for a top-up. But I'm in a fairly detailed conversation with one of my clients, because with that new standard, we've got the opportunity to throw the qualification out altogether and do a completely customized management training program leading towards the endpoint assessment. Now, there are certain colleagues in the university who are saying, "Oh, no, we shouldn't do that. We should offer them our standard modules." That's an interesting creative debate. And I look forward to continuing to have that creative debate. But the day that the university forces me to not respond to client needs is the day we fall out once and for all, because we have to be responsive to the needs of business. And the benefit for our faculty in getting engaged in this sort of stuff, picking up the stories from client engagement that they can then take back into the classroom and share with their undergraduates and bring life to their core teaching activity, it's just too important for us to mess about with it, in my view. Sorry, I do talk a lot.
No, that was all really useful and interesting, actually. Thank you for that.
I mean, I was just going to ask, has there been any sort of desire or from those the corporate clients coming on, that they have the opportunity to sort of build a qualification from? I know we're not teaching it as a qualification, but if they did an accounting course and they came back and did a leadership and then they did something, is there a market, do you think, for building some form of sort of, not necessarily an MBA, because it's not what we're trying to do, but are some of them looking for qualifications out of this or not?
Yes, some of them are, and we're doing a lot of work at the moment looking at what we're calling micro credentials. We have for many years within our portfolio, we've offered sort of postgraduate awards. So we've put together programs for clients which have been customized, in inverted commas, sort of contextualized delivery of maybe an MBA strategy module, a finance module, a marketing module, and a leadership module. So they end up with 4 MBA modules. They get the academic credit for that. And then if they want to carry on, they can transfer into the MBA and they're already carrying that credit in. So there is definitely that interest and that desire. And I think it's certainly worth bearing in mind. But I think there are 2 distinct markets. There are those that are keen on the qualification and are willing to engage in the reading and the assessment activity and all the rest of it. But then there are others that just want the practical stuff. And so we've always had the opportunity to provide a university award that is a non-academic award. So they still get a nice certificate and we can sort of give them that and present it to them and all the rest of it. But they don't have to sit exams or do assessments, and they don't get academic credit at the other end of it. I think it's important to have both of those routes available. Okay. Well, thank you for that. That's because that's something we're looking at, the sort of, I think we call them professional learners, where we are that they're enrolled as professional learners, and also the sort of idea of a stackable degree that you can build it based on a number of modules, but it's still in its infancy, and as you say, different perhaps in terms of the regulation side of things, and that's the I suppose the difficult part to get moving at times is getting the regulations to move forward with us at the speed that we need to move. And you mentioned that, Terry, in your speech there. So has anybody else any questions for Terry at this point? I
think that last conversational point leads quite well into what Gillian's going to talk to us about. So it might be a good time to switch over to Gillian.
Just before we move on, then, if I could just pick up on one point that you said, Terry, about the skill set needed for people working on these programs. If anyone is looking for that sort of professional development for their staff, there's a lot of resources and training available on the Case Centre. They run courses every so often, which are really, really good. They tend to be running quite small groups with very experienced presenters, and there's a lot of sort of standalone resources on their website as well. So it's worth taking a look at that if you're looking to develop staff in that direction.
Yeah, can I just add one other point that's just popped into my mind that refers back to the question that Paul raised around sort of university procedures and quality. And that's related to the way that universities manage their cost and their budgets. Because I suspect most of the people on this call are dealing with institutions that are organising their cost structure in such a way that there's a very big overhead component that covers the cost of the executive and the estates function and all the rest of it that goes in there. So there's a big slice of overhead that's taken out of the budgets for every programme in every school. And there is this expectation that it should run exactly the same way in what you're delivering for business. But the reality is the vast majority of that overhead is completely irrelevant for business. They're not on-campus students. They're not using, the chaplaincy and the student support facilities. They're not coming into the library on a daily basis. So it's important when thinking about the pricing and the cost structures of those programs that you're in a position to have the argument with the powers that be in the university about how that overhead is treated. And of course, as a group, you're more qualified than anybody else to have those debates. Whether or not you've got a chance of winning that debate is another question entirely, but it's certainly worth flagging the issue up.
Thank you, Terry. And on that, I think I would like to welcome Gillian to the floor and your new dawns for accounting and finance, Gillian. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Hopefully everybody can see some slides and hear me. Yeah, okay, great. Have to say, very much enjoyed the earlier presentation, Terry. We're certainly on the same page in quite a lot of your thinking. I'm maybe going to focus a little bit more this afternoon on accredited programs. But maybe first, before I get into some of the experiences we've had at Ulster, I would have been part of that CDAF community that you're in a very long time ago. So maybe just to set the scene, I was, it sounds in some ways that we're some sort of, I always find CDAF nearly a self-help group. And I don't think it maybe has changed too much, but I was a former head of accounting back. I started in about 2010, served 2 terms at Ulster, which was it started as an accounting department, ended up being accounting, finance and economics. And I have to say, when I started back as a very inexperienced head of accounting, who was not coming from an accounting and finance background, I found that network exceptionally supportive and helpful as a new head of department. I think at that time, Gillian Holmes was maybe chair from Newcastle. Great network. So absolutely delighted to be back with you this afternoon in a slightly different role. So in probably 2018, I moved across to what was a business institute type function within the business school. But we were setting up a new business engagement unit. And this was very much to try to grow new sources of additional revenue. Full-time undergraduate MASN places are capped within Northern Ireland. So the only way we have to grow is around non-regulated, part-time, postgrad, executive education, etc. And this was about trying to have one platform, shop window for the business school to try and grow new business. So that's my background. And in some ways, maybe I'm biased, but I would say reflecting, you've caused me to reflect over 10 years to prepare for this today. And my theory on this is that out of all the departments in the business school, probably your accounting and finance department is, maybe the most well placed to look at additional sources of revenue and growing business. And certainly within the experiences we have had at Ulster, that has been our experience. So what I propose maybe this afternoon is to give you a sense of this, some recent developments we have had that suit where we are at Ulster. So I want to maybe set the scene a little bit, because I think that this is important that we maybe mention this. I think it's important maybe to look at some of the ethos, the underlying framework that runs within the business school. And this will be fairly typical for most of you. But I think for us, the business and community engagement is really, really important. And that drives everything from the research and impact agenda, but very much to learning and teaching. And in terms of curriculum development, in the last couple of years, we have moved to an integrated curriculum development framework that relies heavily on external engagement to support curriculum development. And I think that that's really important for us. And that, if you have that basis right at the start, it makes things a little bit easier for reaching out to business to find out where those needs are. Now, the real trick on this, I think, is that eventually you want to move to more strategic partnerships with employers. That, you know, you're almost critical friends, that they trust you, you trust them, that you're really getting below the surface to support them within some of their organizational needs. So that's really the ethos that, you know, we work within. Again, I think it's important to set the scene. I also think, you know, you really have to be relevant to the region and place that you're in. So to give you a little bit of a scene, we're on a campus 10 miles outside of Belfast. We have a multi-campus provision in Northern Ireland, but the one that we're based in is outside Belfast. When I went into that Department of Accounting in 2010, we were really in the midst of graduate employability was not particularly strong at that time. We were in a very depressed graduate market. We struggled a little bit even with some recruitment in places because there was a reaction to there's not going to be jobs within accounting and finance. We have came full circle. That in the last 5 years, we've had a huge amount of foreign direct investment has come into Belfast. So, you know, if you're looking at, say, the big four, you know, typical accounting firms or consulting firms, a lot of their fastest growing offices will be Belfast. So PwC, for example, fastest growing office outside of London is Belfast. And a lot of the large global employers are enjoying some benefits of being in Northern Ireland between unique tax, talent, and value propositions by government. That it is a very attractive place to be. So for us, that presents some opportunities, but I suppose it is worth saying that landscape has caused some really interesting factors, in that for the last 5 years, and I think this problem has been steadily getting worse, there has been raging battles for talent within a lot of global employers and raging battles to retain good graduates. So that is some of the pain points that we're seeing firsthand, and that presents opportunities then as a result of that. So that's really some of the background. The business engagement unit that I manage at the moment, you know, with this dynamic business environment, we're a business school focused on entrepreneurial education, and we're very committed to responding to business, but also ensuring that we're supporting that whole skills and regional attractiveness for economic development. So in terms of that unit, and really it's not dissimilar to an executive education unit, where you know, ultimately we are working with business to ensure a sustainable future for that business, and that will be for things like workforce development, business development, entrepreneurship, and also some pedagogic type incubation type work would go on there as well, that feeds across the academic departments. So I want to sort of give you a sense of where we have found growth areas. And in most of the cases that I'll maybe run through in this session, most of them have actually came out of the accounting and finance department. So I think there's great opportunity here for a little bit of subject stretch and shift within your area and with the staff. And sometimes, certainly for us at Ulster, the type of staff that we have within that department is a very rich combination of staff, where over 50% will have come in from professional practice. Yes, we'll have a more research orientated group in there as well. But also there has been you know, some recruitment maybe around business transformation, trying to think of business technology as well, that we're trying to stretch a little bit out as well. So some areas of, you know, have really, I suppose, been growth areas for us. So, you know, if you think of this battle for talent, what really happened, and this is going back maybe 5 years, that we had Deloitte came to us at that time, who were struggling within the graduate marketplace to recruit, and were very keen for an in-house school leaver program, school degree program. And at the same time, degree apprenticeships were starting in Northern Ireland. So that really led us down the whole route of, in Northern Ireland, it's all about higher level degree apprenticeships. So it's this alternative pathway. Growth area, certainly for us, and it's the same, I'm sure, in GB, anything around professional, financial, technology sectors, these are popular routes for those types of employers. Multidisciplinary programs, hugely popular. This is really what we hear on a regular basis by these firms. And the big advantage for these types of employers, it's an alternative pipeline immediately. So it's like turning on a tap. So it is no surprise in one way, for, you know, that by 2021, Deloitte are investing heavily in their Belfast presence, and they will say openly that over 1/5 of their workforce in Belfast is these degree apprenticeship students who are providing a different pipeline, new talent, fresh type of thinking, and it's helping in terms of, you know, building a sustainable pipeline as well. So just to maybe run through, you know, where are we now on apprenticeships? Now, this will maybe surprise you a little bit. The Deloitte programme, although based in an accounting and finance department, is actually around business technology. And this is where we work closely with some of the other departments within the business school. But this is where I think keeping an open mind in terms of what is possible, how can we stretch things, that we still have some of the core staff within that department teaching on that programme. So that started in 2015. That's now a sector-based programme. We then moved to looking at things like, we always had a part-time accounting degree. That was fairly steady numbers every year. And again, we've looked at changing that. It's now accounting and management. And again, that is an apprenticeship program that's opened up to really any employer. Now, at the moment, that tends to be more of an SME type employer is using that program. And I think we have a lot more potential there to recruit. Then in the last couple of years, we also moved into financial technology. So this is a new degree. And again, we use some of the learning from the business technology. And we've looked at our current finance undergraduate full-time degree to look at what could we do part-time. FinTech is a really significant area within Belfast. And it continues to be, but real challenges there with securing talent. Now, what we find maybe in one way, some of these apprenticeship programs are a great way to future-proof curriculum across the board and apply some of the learning to full-time provision. But I'm not sure that some of this provision will recruit well with full-time and UCAS, that it does take a little bit of time for that school teachers, school leavers to really get their head around where the market is going. Whereas for us, traditional accounting type programs are always popular at the moment. So it's knowing where to place programs in which market is half your battle here. Within the faculty now, we've also looked at a customer operations program. That's maybe not as relevant here. We then looked at some of our finance master's programs, and again, we had an issue as well with some employers in Northern Ireland keeping the talent within finance graduates. That this started off as an in-house program for first derivatives, where it was 2 years part-time on global capital markets to try and help develop and retain some of these great graduates. That has now moved to a sector-wide program. And then also within my unit, and again, we're stretching out now to the accounting and finance team, we also have launched a master's around business in technology. So that's really geared for your tech graduate who badly needs business management, business acumen type skills within a tech industry. Now, I would say for us, there's a little bit of blurring between apprenticeships and employer-sponsored programs. Some employers will want to sponsor a program and will not want any of the hassle of apprenticeships, such as their want and need to secure and retain staff. And others may start off like that and move into apprenticeships where the funding is really important. Now, for the purposes of today, and I don't want to keep you too long on this, we have a YouTube channel within the business school that has some really nice videos of some of these employers talking about why did they come to us, what were they looking for, and what they're getting out of these programs. So that's a useful link maybe to look at in your own time. One example just to note on the global capital markets, the more that you can almost, I think it was, you mentioned this point earlier, Sarah, there about stackable degrees. I think that has real currency within the Masters. So we're also running a PGC of this program within Dublin under a government skills initiative, where that's a short, sharp qualification to convert people, graduates, into finance. So again, an example just of being flexible to suit a different market. Then we come on to things that this is just one other example. Now, this one is not an apprenticeship. This is a sponsored program by PwC. And just want to sort of set the scene here. And I think, Terry, you made this comment about, utilizing your contacts. In my experience, the best industry links we have in the faculty are always from accounting and finance. Those types of staff usually are well connected, particularly if they came in from practice. And this is a great example here where the individual carrying the PwC placard is an accounting alumni of Ulster. He's a visiting professor of the business school. He has worked with us for a very long time on program development. That when he came to the point of having some challenges where he's very keen to look at ways of developing graduates and broadening their skill set within that professional services operational area, that he's reaching out back to the business school to see what we can do. So that this was a new program. It's delivered solely for PwC in Belfast, as PwC operate. But we're using some established modules from other programs, and we're adding some new ones in there to suit client needs. And again, that's us really trying to get below the surface of some of these large, now this would be a strategic partner, but also, underlying that development, there's very good relations here with alumni, has really helped for us. Now, increasingly, I think the whole area of educational models and this looking slightly different at curriculum and awards is a really interesting one at the moment. And I just want to touch very briefly on this. We've done a little bit of work this last couple of years around future of work, and we've worked with a US strategist there, a lady called Heather McGowan. I don't know if you've heard of her, but I think there's something here in her work's really interesting for us, that traditionally, you know, most departments would have been, you know, very much focused on the 18 to 22-year-old, you know, looking at that graduate degree, looking at, you know, these predetermined skills and existing knowledge, and that was the focus. Whereas now, obviously, with future of work, you know, it's all about continuous learning, and it's this change of mindset that it's all about a will of learning to learn. Now, this, I think, is almost, you know, I suppose we're seeing this within current developments at Ulster, that most of the new developments are probably all around postgraduate, maybe it's part-time apprenticeships, or it's looking at upskilling and reskilling, as somebody has maybe had a career in something where the sector's now depressed and they want moved into another area. And it's that type of opportunity that we find is very important. But I suppose it's also worth noting that that type of approach requires sometimes shorter awards, some accredited, some not accredited. So for us, future of work has been very important. And, you know, we're now into things like, this is a new master's and a new design for us. And I think that this has great currency. We're trying to restructure a master's into 3 distinct awards. That if we are working with individuals or employers, they're not having to commit to a full master's program. That they can look at, well, actually, I'm going to send maybe 10 on the PGC, see how that goes. And if that goes well, we might look at progressing on to the next qualification. Now, graduates seem to like this as well, in that they can gain quick accreditation and a quick acknowledgement of their new skills and knowledge. And again, you know, if we look at that business analysis and consulting certificate, some of the team that would have been in accounting and finance are delivering part of that. Now, we've had to reach out to our management and leadership and marketing colleagues for the PGD. And then the master's qualification, you know, tends to be that project as a live project, usually within the organisation. And depending on what that is, will depend on the project supervision. Now, there was a point earlier about language, really important. We find that within our conversations with the business community, future of work is really important at the moment. And I know the professional bodies are very, very good on driving your profession forward on this. But you know that the 3 key themes that we work with is this business understanding, human insights, and technology. That's the sort of language that, you know, we hear every week. And we're trying to feed those themes into some of our programs. So that this is a very nice model where those themes run through all of those qualifications, and yet it joins up, you know, and in terms of some employers justifying the spend in-house, this helps them show the impact of supporting programs like this. Now, so that's taken us sort of through the last 5 years, where we have noticed some growth. We've also had some new master's programs linked to the professional bodies as well. Over the last year then, very different climate for everybody, and very busy times for departments. But certainly with us in Northern Ireland, huge growth area has been upskilling and reskilling. A lot of government funding coming into that. for those impacted by COVID. So again, through a government-sponsored contract, we looked at some postgrad certificates. One was around enabling business recovery. And again, that was pulling at different modules in the business school that are well placed to support that. You know, we pulled our business analysis and consulting certificate out. We have an international business one there as well. But I think that this will continue to be a growth area. And I noticed this week under the Chartered Association of Business Schools, and I see there's government funding there coming in for management, leadership and SME type recovery programs. You could say that accounting and finance professionals are well placed to look at that type of program offering. Another point, and this is maybe, I'm going to come out at the end, a few general points. Now it's interesting, you know, my background is more consumer research and marketing. So you're going to say that this is probably typical from a marketing academic here. But I have always found that accounting and finance departments have some wonderful things happening in them, some great staff, but really sometimes the challenge is getting the message out. So I do think, you know, it's still important to keep the comms, the fact that you're highly relevant for business in your curriculum and keeping your profile out. We try to do that a little bit more than we used to. And, you know, to make the point that, you know, it's very relevant curriculum. We've done a little bit of work with the National Centre for University and Business, some case studies there in some of our programs. At the moment, FinTech is a huge area in Belfast, and we work with government on case studies to show foreign direct investment clients what happens if you come to Belfast. How are these academic departments reaching out to support you? That's all really important at the moment. And that, you know, does help bring in business as well. So I've tried to reflect on, you know, my kind of advice from the experiences we have had in recent years. And if I was summarizing, you know, I think that these are the key factors as I see it at the moment. I think anything you can do to utilize your current business relationships and alumni and employer contacts within that trusted context. And really, probably for us, we get a lot of business around trying to understand the pain points for business. Where are they struggling? You know, what sort of graduates can they not attract? Have they staff retention issues? Have they training skills challenges? Really trying to understand those issues to try to work backwards. Okay, what have we got? What can we do on this? I think it's a really good time at the moment to start to review your employer advisory boards. If you have visiting professors, guest speakers, who have you got that you work with? And are they capturing the current business opportunities and covering the growth sectors? You may need to stretch a little bit on this to look at slightly different areas that traditionally you may not have worked with to see where their needs are. For us at the moment, the tax sector has huge needs for business education and accounting and finance. Then we have things like you know, working with government, understanding where they're about to go, if that is possible, and what are their priorities, their challenges, where do you fit in their support ecosystem? Have you got good links in there? That if they've got new clients coming to work in your area, that, you know, they will think of talking to your department at some point. I think this is going to be a really important one. The more you can work across faculties and look at multidisciplinary programs, that's a win-win. In reality, that's not always easy. But it's looking at, can you resource all subject areas, or do I need to work with computing and engineering? Or maybe I need to start bringing in some new staff around application of technology that complements some of the core areas. That needs to, you know, that's always important. Again, another one is, you know, looking at your staff base and the skills that you have in your own departments. Have you reviewed those staff profiles fully for subject, stretch and shift? And I know when we went into the Deloitte school leaver program, we had a lot of new areas that we needed to cover there. And, you know, I'd say we had some surprises there as well in terms of staff who were very willing to have some update, retraining. Maybe it was around ERP systems, more technology focused from our own team that actually really added value for us and for the client. So it's about urging staff to look at those distant networks that they did have. Maybe going back, they were involved in an area that now is really important. And, you know, I think, Terry, you mentioned, you know, some of this about, you know, who actually does that discussion. And there's a great, a very nice paper there in the Harvard Business Review about cross-silo leadership. You're really, it is worth having a think about who are your cultural brokers in your areas or in your faculty. I think that's what happened to us at Ulster, that a lot of this work was happening at department level, but we needed it to be a little bit more strategic. So who are those cultural brokers? And sometimes accounting and finance staff are very, very good at this, particularly if they've worked in business, where they can transfer between an academic arena, a business arena. They've got the language for both, that they can talk both of these types of environments to try and ensure, and because that seems to be the growth areas, is the cross-boundary work. And the more that you have flexibility to shift between those, that's really attractive for business. Just in finishing, you know, I'm sure this is fairly typical in your own regions, but for us in Northern Ireland, this is really typical at the moment. Every month, there will be a job announcement. It may be with a global employer and it may be with the Big Four. And, you know, initial impressions, excellent. This is February 21, 200 jobs for KPMG. And you read in the small print, it's digital consulting. It's not pure accounting and finance. Now, this is typical, what I can see for the large accounting firms at the moment. It's all digital consulting. So this is where the shift and stretch of subject is really important for growth. For us, you know, do not think we have it all sorted. We never do. You know, just in conclusion, you know, what are we looking at for the next year? COVID, certainly a lot of uncertainty there. I think for us, there'll be a huge emphasis around the reskilling, the upskilling, business recovery. We're waiting on a Northern Ireland skills strategy. We want to see what's within that. We've an updated programme for government. There's a lot of nice themes in there, but again, working out where do we fit. We're also moving campuses to a new campus within Belfast, which, you know, we hope will bring us closer to business, but a lot of practical challenges within that as well. I think maybe the final point here I'll end on, and you know, a really good report that came out in 2015, that Dowling report on business university collaboration, is excellent. I still think it rings very true. I always think we have a role to do looking at, you know, promotional staff reward opportunities associated with the revenue generating part of the business. Sometimes it's difficult to balance that with more of the traditional promotional requirements, but it's trying to get that balance right, that the really innovative staff who are opportunity focused and see opportunities and are bringing them back, extending their networks, trying to be, you know, proactive. Really important to support those staff members that that you're trying to get the best from the teams. And, you know, I would say anything where we've had success, we've had great teams around it. And it's staff that are opportunity focused. And that's something we're always looking at, how best we support that. So you've probably had quite a rapid review there. Very happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Gillian. Yes, I'll open the floor up to anybody who has any questions for Gillian in the first instance. Darren.
Hi, Gillian. Thank you. That was great. I'm really interested in the sort of balance between the non-apprenticeship and apprenticeship programs and the demands and requests from employers, and whether you see a shift towards one or the other, because obviously apprenticeships have been, in terms of publicity, you know, the thing to do. Everybody's got to get into apprenticeships. But I think then once universities are into it, they're starting to find the administrative burden associated with it, etc. Are you finding the same with employers then, that they are picking up on administrative burdens and not, and then sort of offsetting that against the money they can claim back?
Very interesting question, Darren. We deliver some apprenticeship activity in GB. But at the moment, we would prefer to grow the Northern Ireland business, because I will say openly, I don't think we quite appreciated the administration requirement around GB apprenticeships. It is a huge undertaking, what I see of it. And I think if you are good into that market, you obviously need to be going in with your eyes open and working with the right employers that are committed to working with you to help be compliant. For us in Northern Ireland, we have a little bit more flexibility. I'm sure it will gradually, it will be similar to the GB model, but with a little bit more, it wouldn't be as administrative heavy at the moment. Some employers, what would I say at the moment? I think they're all very keen to access the funding, that's for sure. So we're getting a little bit more move on that at the moment. Where it becomes unstuck is some employers are not happy about an open classroom, where they will want a closed cohort. They feel it's a highly confidential environment, and they are concerned that their students will think of going somewhere else, which, you know, I think there is a good experience with an open program, that they learn from each other. So if they're very, very set on closed cohorts and it doesn't fit the criteria for apprenticeships, then we're into a sponsored fee paying program by the employer. But at the moment, probably for us, because apprenticeships is only starting now to really grow and take off in Northern Ireland, it's getting a bit more interest. But it's a challenging environment in GB, from what I see of it.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any questions for Gillian? I mean, I think you're quite fortunate to have obviously had the influx of the employment in the area. I mean, that's obviously made a huge difference to the engagement side of things for you, and that's the sort of thing which, coming from an area where there's not as much, you know, obviously we have regional investment, etc., but we in Swansea we're often seen as the second class city to Cardiff, which has all the big offices, etc., and that's something that you know, I don't know what other sort of regional smaller universities, as it were, or those who are in the sticks, find that perhaps that employer engagement side of things more difficult because of the region in which we operate in.
It's maybe a thought, Sarah, on this, awful to say it, that maybe the last year will change things, in that I think there's a lot more openness by employers to look at hybrid learning, where they're starting to see actually online can work. And I think there's something around looking at where your alumni are, who's in those senior jobs, where are they based? There may be more openness now to looking at different providers in different locations, because you're not expecting somebody to, come onto campus weekly. I think now it's changing.
That's interesting. Joan, I think you had your hand up to ask a question.
Yeah. Hello. Apologies, I had to attend another meeting. I came as quick as I can. Gillian, sorry, I missed the start. We're colleagues, obviously, for many years. So, Gillian, thanks for supporting CDAF. Just wanted to ask, you might have covered it. I think at Ulster, what we did was a deliberate kind of a very planned strategy to grow this area of business, and putting yourself, say, in a very senior position to actually do that. Do you think, I think a lot of accounting and finance departments maybe don't go down this route. They kind of do it as part of their normal activities. Have you any advice, maybe you've already talked about this, for others about how they could actually make more of this happen using that model?
Yeah, it's a good question, Joan. In some ways, I think through your staff base and your alumni base, there's a very good chance that you have great existing links with, particularly with big business. So I think it's about trying to look at your best contacts, trying to get a handle on their needs, and then to work backwards, what can you deliver? And if you can't deliver all of their requirements, can you partner with somebody internally? Or, sometimes, we've gained some work around analysing an existing training programme within an organisation and almost providing a wraparound that's helping them secure accreditation as well. So we've worked with somewhere, some of the staff in the firm are recognised university teachers, and they're delivering some of the content. And then we're doing some of a wraparound and to try and build an academic programme as well that meets training and academic requirements. Now, you can't do everything. So, it's looking at where are those opportunities. And probably if we reflect, and some of this was not planned, as well, some of the really good links we have had are through maybe past alumni, or maybe it was a placement employer who had worked for a very long time with us, who, when they had the issue, came to the business school. And it's almost, I suppose it's being approachable to that you're willing to try something a little bit different if the contract, if it stacks up for you as well.
Darren, I'll bring Darren in again. Darren, I can see Darren's hand up. Darren?
Yeah, it was to follow up on Joan's question, actually. And I think this is probably for both Terry and Gillian, if they've got different views, perhaps. And it was really thinking about the subject matter that we're discussing today, the new dawns for accounting and looking for new revenue streams, etc. We know that business schools are the cash cows of universities, and in many ways ANF are the cash cows of business schools in terms of certainly undergraduate students, etc. And so they do tend to be extremely busy, extremely resource pressured, but also because they're seen as the cash cows, seen by the university then as the obvious choice to now start developing these corporate programs, corporate-led academic programs, apprenticeships. But they're already the most intense work areas, possibly in the university with high numbers of students. So I guess getting to my question, it is, do either of you or both of you think that this is activity that should not really be done by an academic accounting and finance team? Or does it need a separate team to be able to run this sort of stuff properly and give it the time and devotion that it needs? Or do you think it is possible for academic departments to be running these type of activities?
Well, I'll maybe go first on this, Terry. Maybe for us, it's probably a little bit of both. I think some of the employers have they trust and respect the academic colleagues. They know their capabilities. That gives you great reputation in the marketplace, but they can't deliver all of it. They don't have the flexibility either. So that's where you need to be able to partner. Maybe it's with a executive education team, for us, the business engagement, or maybe it's looking at, you know, some associate staff to try and stretch that. But sometimes I think if you want a way into the firms, there's certainly a lot of trust around some of our academic accounting and finance teams.
I'd echo that. I think the trust and the networks and the reputation that you have as specialists and as academics is very important. But I'm also conscious, again, of, I think, a tendency in universities to add things to people's day jobs sometimes and not fully understand the implications of it. So where possible, whether it's an executive education function or whether a research knowledge exchange operation or whatever it is, I think utilizing those wider networks and capabilities is important where you can. The other thing I'd say is, going back to Gillian's point about, you know, the pressure on talent and the war for talent in the marketplace, this isn't solely an issue in accounting and finance. For example, one of the largest shortfalls in talent in the UK economy is for trained engineers. And one of the biggest challenges in the engineering sector is having competent engineering managers. And those engineering managers need to manage budgets and do investment appraisal and all the rest of it. So opportunities like that, and partnering with colleagues perhaps in a school of engineering, or if you've got a medical school and partnering with colleagues to look at healthcare specific opportunities, I think is also important. There has been a tendency, I think, to assume that this is just in the purview of business schools to an extent, or for business schools to think this is what we do, stay away, this is ours. And I would argue there's a great deal of value in building those networks inside the institution to enable a broader solution set to be brought to the market in that case. And that's one of the reasons why my department ended up moving into the centre, to try and facilitate that sort of activity. So yes, you can do some of it yourselves. You can certainly get things started yourselves, but don't underestimate the additional work that's involved, the account management, the relationship management, the program administration. All of these things take effort. And from what I've seen, generally, university departments don't have the spare resource to dedicate to make that happen quite often. So you need to try and find that resource from somewhere.
Can I, David, one quick question, and then we'll move to Louise, so that we can cut.
Quick one for Gillian. It's just those 200 KPMG digital technology people wanted, digital consultants. My first year students, we've got a new digital training department at our university. You can sign up for any digital course you want. What digital skills should they be eyeing up for our accounting and finance students?
What should we be going for? It's quite interesting, actually, in that case. They are relying on an assured skills academy model in Northern Ireland. And this works where they take graduates from any discipline and they upskill them within a 68-week program into, in this case, it's digital consulting. Now, I'm sure, I know, looking at some of the professional body reports recently, you know, curriculum keeps moving in accounting, for example. So, you know, I'm sure that digital side is going in more and more at the moment. But I suppose, looking at it, anything you can do that's highlighting their digital skills, digital fluency, and also their consulting skills, that those are growth areas for sure at the moment.
Thank you. That's very kind of you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and thank you, Gillian, for your time. A very interesting talk there, and I think whilst on a theme with Terry, quite a different approach. So thank you very much indeed for your time, and for everybody for the questions there for Gillian. So I would delighted now to ask Louise from the ACCA, and please, the floor is now yours, Louise. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So yeah, my name is Louise McAlinden, and I am the Partner Engagement Lead for UK Universities, which basically means that I look after the team of business development managers who are working with universities to link with the ACCA and introduce students to ACCA while they're still studying their undergraduate degrees. Not going to go into too much detail about what we do today. I'm just going to give you an overview of the ACCA itself and what's front of mind for us just now, and some of the kind of recent updates and current brand themes that we're working on, which I think will be of interest to you. I think someone's going to share my slides because I'm currently logged in on my daughter's iPad. So thank you very much. Thank you. If you could move on to slide 2, please. Thank you. So yeah, just a brief overview of the ACCA, including the qualification, how we are helping students prepare for the digital age, and updating our current and upcoming focus areas, and RI exams and student support resources. If you can move on, please. Yeah, so we are the #1 professional body in the world in terms of size. With ACCA, it's all about opening doors to a more interesting career in finance. You'll see that ACCA members move around different sectors and industries more than any other member of any other professional body, and that will come out a little bit more as I talk about the qualification itself. If you could move on, please. Yeah, so just to highlight just how global ACCA is, at the moment we have 227,000 members and 544,000 students worldwide, and we're in 179 countries. We've got, I think it's around 101 customer service centres worldwide, so that gives you an idea of how local we can be for our students, and how approachable we can be from our students as well. And having this global presence really allows us to sort of drive change in the accountancy sector by advising governments, organisations and regulators across the world. And this is achieved by working with our members and employers. And that in itself attracts students into the UK as well because of that international reach. And as an ACCA member, the students know that they're sort of helping us shape the future of the profession, and it's opening doors with employers across the globe. So that's really what sort of drives students to be interested in ACCA when we come to speak to them in universities at the moment. Just moving on, I'll just touch on the qualification just very quickly. So this is the current structure of the qualification. Probably most of you will be aware of this. At the moment, we have our applied knowledge and our applied skills section, and most of your accounting and finance students will be exempt from all of those papers within ACCA, which means that we're just moving straight on to the professional level papers. You see, and one of the main sort of selling points, if you like, of ACCA is the fact that the students in university can use previous experience, they can use experience from placements or internships, as well as experience post-university towards that 36 months requirement for ACCA membership. So it really accelerates that path for them, and that's just all about providing that employability for students that are wanting to study towards the ACCA qualification. It sort of negates that need to go into a 3-year training contract, if you like, once they've finished their degree. And in some cases, we see students quite easily shaving off sort of 1.5 years of their experience well, before they've even left university, just through what they're doing at university. Moving on to our professional level papers, sorry, if you just stay on that last slide, sorry. That was my fault for saying moving on. We do have our business leader and business reporting papers. Those are our 2 most recent changes in terms of the papers that we have within ACCA. I'll touch on them in a little bit more detail in a second. But all students have to take those papers. Our ethics and professional skills module, again, is another really important resource for students, particularly making that transition from university to studying for professional level exams. It's not something that's an easy task. A lot of students find it really difficult to move on from that because there's such a jump, and that ethics and professional skills module is something that's there to help them. It's a 20-hour module, and it gives them lots of insight into the professional level papers and help to sort of pass those papers. So we're looking at introducing that a little bit more in universities, and for anyone that's on the call just now, if you are part of our learning hub, then you'll have access to that ethics and professional skills module. The Education Hub is open for all of our UK universities, so feel free to contact me afterwards if you want access to that. There's lots of good resources on there, including this. And then the students finally will choose where they want to specialise. So that's a kind of brief overview, if you like, of the qualification as it stands at the moment. And like I said, most students coming out of university with an ANF degree will get their exemption from the first 9, which is the maximum exemptions that we give. We can just move on. The next 2 slides show the digital aspects of the qualification, or how we prepare students for the digital age through our qualification. This particular slide shows how even at an early stage of the qualification, we're already introducing things like fintech and big data and statistics. And this will progress as the student progresses through the exams, with things like ADA being introduced. These are the exams that students will generally get exemptions from, so we are aware that that will be taught in their undergraduate degree. Moving on to the next slide though, this focuses on a little bit more detail. It just draws your attention to the kind of professional level exams and how they support our students in preparing and thinking ahead digitally. The fact that we have moved these exams to CBE in most markets demonstrates this, for one. So this is something that we're really keen to do, and we did it last year during the COVID pandemic when we had a million other things going on. So it just kind of happened without being a sort of big deal, if you like. But it is a big deal for ACCA, and that it supports the fact that students aren't used to sort of going in and writing for 3 hours to do an exam. So it's about making that more accessible and making it a little bit easier for the students in terms of the actual format of the exam themselves. You can also see from the slides the variation in terms of cloud technology, disruptive technologies, to cryptocurrencies and fintech and blockchain. And we work within a variety of external partners as well to support our students at university and when they come out of university as well. So we have partnerships with the likes of Xero for certifications for students studying their undergraduate degree at the moment, and that will support them again in moving on in the job market. And then for students, we're just about to launch a new partnership with QuickBooks for alumni students, so you'll probably receive emails in the next week or so about that, and that's just giving them that sort of kickstart again for any alumni that are maybe struggling in terms of employment. Obviously with the pandemic, that's been difficult for most, so that's another sort of partnership that we've gone into in order to help our students and help them progress through the exams as well. So just moving on, I just wanted to touch a little bit on some of our sort of brand themes and what we do to sort of support our students and business in terms of these brand themes. So the main one at the moment is about inclusion and creating opportunity for all. Just moving on to the next slide. Our Q4, which we're in at the moment, obviously, the theme is inclusion in action, and we launched the theme on the 11th of January, and that was followed with a report on the 20th of January from our professional insights team and social media campaigns to promote these as well. We then ran various webinars throughout February and another report which is due actually this coming Monday around gender inclusion. So that ties in perfectly with International Women's Day. And that's going to be followed up with a report on women in finance. And all of this is supported by our increasing social media presence and campaigns. Part of our inclusion in action as well is mentoring. So for anyone that's an ACCA member, this gives them the opportunity to give back to students who, whether they're undergraduate students at the moment who are interested in ACCA, or students that are out currently studying towards their ACCA qualifications and actively taking exams. So this gives members the chance to give back. It supports career ambitions of our affiliates and our members. And it gives us a chance to really demonstrate our global network and connect that global network as well. So it's about introducing those students to our global network of employers and the opportunities that then gives them as well. Just moving on. I just wanted to take a quick look ahead now to our future themes that we're going to be focusing on. Rethinking careers, rethinking sustainable business, and rethinking our current world are the future themes for us. And the COVID-19 crisis has really made all of us think about our careers and how we run business. And it's highlighted the fact that accountants are more in demand now than ever. So just looking at the first brand theme, the first of our themes is going to emphasise the attractiveness of a career in accountancy. We'll emphasise the skills needed for long-term career success and the growing importance and value of transferable skills. Underpinning everything will be a new professional insights report released in April that reveals the aspirations and ambitions of the next generation in the workplace, so Generation Z. and what this means for the profession, the employers, and attracting future talent. And that's something that we really want to get our universities involved in as well. So there'll be lots of things coming out for roundtables and panel discussions around the sort of Gen Z interest that we have at the moment. Looking at our second brand theme, we are continuing to support our stakeholders through the challenges of COVID-19 as they sort of strive to recover. And in our Q3 brand theme, we're going to build on this with a focus on rethinking business for sustainable recovery. And then finally, rethinking our world. So this theme considers the vital role of the profession in creating a more sustainable world. So it's from providing the foundations for fair and prosperous economies and societies to helping establish trusted institutions and public services to speaking the universal language of business that connects organisations around the world. And we're going to use this theme to showcase accountancy as a cornerstone profession and ACCA as a force for public good. At the moment, what is very much front of mind for us, given that we are currently in exam week for our March exams, is the smooth running of our remotely invigilated exams. And most professional bodies have moved to remotely invigilated exams as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. This is something that we had in our plans for the next 5 years. And obviously, like everyone else, we had to massively accelerate that plan. So in the UK, we cancelled exams altogether in June. We ran a small pilot in July. And then for September and December, we ran remotely invigilated exams in areas that were required due to local lockdown. However, for March, we made the decision early just to support our partners, our employer partners and our learning providers to run all UK exams remotely. And as you can see here, between the 1st and the 5th of March, 20,000 remote exams will be sat in the UK. We know that this won't be without technical difficulties, but we do have plans in place for students who have issues, such as letting them book next week. And we've also worked really hard to ensure that all of our partners are really informed. We have newsletters going out weekly, webinars. We've had about 3,000 attendees at webinars over the past couple of weeks, and Instagram live sessions. So we're looking at other areas of social media now to make sure that everyone's getting the message and everyone is as informed as possible so that the exams run as smoothly as possible as well. So far this has been really well received. Again, just to look at some of the resources and support, and this is really important just in terms of the fact that it's relevant for students that are in university at the moment as much as it is for students that are out in the workplace. If we can move on to the next slides. Thank you. So yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about our competency framework. This is something that's not highlighted anywhere near as much as what we would like. The competency framework is an online tool and students can use this throughout their journey in order to become a qualified member, and employers can use it as well to see what skills are lacking and what skills their trainees need to develop. So the framework will identify the key skills and competencies gained as you progress throughout the qualification, and that's whether you are actually physically sitting exams or whether you've gained exemptions as well. There's currently 12 competency areas, and ethics and professionalism is obviously at the heart of everything that we do. Each competency area is extensively mapped out to each exam syllabus, so it shows exactly where in the qualification students can gain the skills that they need for the workplace. And again, like I said, that's whether you're taking the actual ACCA exam or whether you've gained that exemption. And the framework also shows where the performance objectives and are met for PER, and it can also help decide which option exams to choose. So if a student's got a particular area of interest, it can help them decide whether or not that is the right route for them to go down when they choose to specialise in the final level of the exams. Just moving on. Thank you. So I just wanted to kind of show you an example of an exam fact sheet. You know yourself, we, ACCA don't actually provide tuition to our students, but we do have a huge amount of resources on our website that can help students if they do choose to study, to self-study. So this slide shows an example of a fact sheet for the financial management exam. It can help, so this provides steps for success, key resources for that exam, and hints and tips on how to tackle that exam as well. I guess students an understanding of what's actually required in that field as well. So it's just one of the other resources that I kind of wanted to draw your attention to. This is all available on our website. Just move on to the next slide. So yeah, just to touch very quickly on our COVID-19 hub, again, another response to the pandemic. This gives sort of key advice for students during this difficult period, helps them in terms of coping with exams, their mental well-being, and it gives them a sort of community support. And that's open to students, again, whether they're in university studying and have not actually aligned themselves to ACCA fully yet, or whether they're out studying and taking exams actively. So it'll give our key exam updates along with a whole host of FAQs. And again, that's all found on the website. Just conscious of time, I'll move on as quickly as possible. I just wanted to talk today about our Professional Insights team. So obviously, as you will all know, the ACCA qualification is very much focused on preparing our students for the workplace. With its global reach, ACCA has a dedicated Professional Insights team, and the team carry out extensive research in all areas affecting the accounting profession. To inform our qualification, we don't just work closely with employers across all sectors, we work with government bodies and regulators as well. Our digital themes will run through the qualification and are born out of our close links with employers and how they see the professional accountant of the future developing. One of our main reports that sort of shaped the qualification, if you like, is the professional accountant of the future. And that highlighted the 7 professional quotients that employers need. And that was, for that report, we surveyed around 2,000 CFOs and CEOs worldwide in order to gain the information that we needed to make sure that we were making the right changes to our qualification. So it focuses on things like emotional intelligence, vision, commercial awareness and leadership. And that sort of also led to the most recent development for our EPSM module as well. More recent reports include a report on the digital accountant and a report on the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. And that sort of details the challenges faced and future trends that they're seeing developing. And a recent example of this was during the pandemic, employers had furloughed junior staff because they didn't know how to bring them on board remotely. Our PI department then responded to that by writing a report on how to do this using key skills and tips, showing that ACCA is a thought leader on all subjects in the industry and not just an examining body. So for anyone, I mean, that sort of touches on the Professional Insights team. I spoke about it a little bit earlier in terms of our brand themes. It's something that comes out. We've currently got some of our universities working with our Professional Insights team on podcasts, bringing students in on that as well. So it's something that we're really trying to push a little bit more and highlight a little bit more, particularly to universities, the value in that team and what they bring. For anyone that is interested further, we do have, if you move on to the next slide, we do have our Professional Insights app that can be downloaded on any Android, iOS phone. And that'll just give you sort of the podcast or the short version of the reports as well, so that it's a little bit more bite size. You can read the full report if you like, but it does give you the sort of shorter version as well. So it picks out the kind of key points. And just moving on, this is an app that we would like all our students, again, whether in university or currently actively studying. It's a student accounting app, so it helps guide them through their ACCA journey. It'll give students important updates about exams. It gives them lots of career advice. There's interviews with employers, students, members, advice from tutors, news from the accountancy world. So there's lots and lots of information in there. So that's something we really like to push out. And I think that's something that would really benefit some of the students that are currently studying their undergraduate degrees as well. They can choose topics that are relevant to them. So if they're already kind of thinking about specialising, then they can do that through the app as well, and keep up to date with latest stories and videos, etc. as well. So that sort of highlights, that was a really whistle-stop tour of what we're doing. And it just highlights some of the resources that we have available and some of the research that we're doing in terms of staying ahead of the profession as well, and how that then comes back into our qualification and benefits our students that are studying towards that qualification. I'm happy to stop there if anyone has any questions.
Does anybody have any questions for Louise? That was a very enlightening talk in terms of all the various aspects, you know, through and the support mechanisms that we have in place as well to see how things are developed through the syllabus, etc. as well. So thank you for that. Has anybody any questions for Louise? Okay, so Darren, I think it's Darren sharing the screen. So perhaps if you could unshare the screen so that I can, there we are, brilliant. It's lovely to see everybody just back there at the end. So Well, if nobody's any questions, is anybody any further questions for our speakers today? Well, I mean, I would like to thank you all on behalf of CDAF and obviously the participants here. Guest speakers, are you happy if we share your slides? We normally email them out to participants of the workshop, so they don't get put. We don't put them up on. It goes to the closed group of those who have been in attendance. So if I have your permission to do so, if not, that it's not a problem. But if you're okay with us sharing those slides, that would be great to the participants, and then we can use that. And I say thank you very much for those 3 very interesting talks. Terry talking about the wider exec education opportunities, and I say opportunities across different aspects of the university as well. I mean, accounting training for managers is something which there's probably quite a lot in universities that we could probably do with a fair amount of that as well. And you made the point at the end of that with regards to the amount of resources that we need to ensure that we get the help and support in place to allow us to put that into place properly. And then that linked in quite nicely with what Gillian was talking about with the apprenticeship side of things. That took a lot of resources to actually get it up and running. And I think probably then the nice link from what Gillian was talking about in terms of using the employers to help shape the curriculum of the courses that you were developing links into what the ACCA are doing through their Professional of the Future Accountant, the professional insights that they do. So a nice theme coming through all of the talks there today, which are all quite different, but underlying some nice key things in there. So I mean, I do think we could all do with looking out for our alumni better and making sure that we use them better. I think that's something which we have alumni departments, and I think we sort of often run scared of either sharing a contact because we think that somebody else might nick that contact and use them for something else, or over contacting and being a drain on our contacts. So I think that's something that we need to do. But I think that's a really important point. Is that's got to be the future. And I equally I take your point of going forward, Gillian. The network is going to change because the delivery mechanism can change, and therefore we don't have to perhaps be seen as being regional or whatever. We can deliver on a very different basis. There's lots of USPs that each university will have that we can use with our alumni network in there. So I would say echo my thanks to you all, and I can see that coming through the chat that everybody is also saying thank you very much indeed for your time. It's been great to have you with us today, and I'd just like to remind you that we have our annual conference, which is going to be a virtual conference coming up very soon, 6th of May, I think. If is that the date? Somebody's going to tell me it's the 6th. I'm just going to quickly look at my phone. It's not. I thought I had it in front of me, but we're all the committee. We're all grabbing for our phones to look for the date of the conference. And I think it was because we got last year we got postponed because we had to change because of the bank holiday, the extra bank holiday we had last year.
It is Thursday the 6th of May, Sarah. Yeah,
Thursday the 6th of May, and what we'll be looking at on the Thursday at our annual conference will be just looking at teaching in a COVID-19 environment, lessons learned and the way forward. So that will be our conference this year. We've got Barbara Flood, Greg Stoner, Alan Sangster, Hilary Lindsay coming to join us to take us through teaching in a COVID environment, lessons learned. And I'm sure we've all got lessons that we can share. Best practice, and also as Gillian hinted at the beginning, this is sometimes as a bit of a self-help group as well, so it's quite nice to be able to test the water with our colleagues in this environment. After our conference in May, we will then be organising our next workshop, which is on the 5th of November. Hopefully we might be able to get something in person, God forbid. If that's the case, likely to be in London somewhere, but please watch the website for that and the various newsletters. But the topic for that, we will be looking at planning impact case studies, managing the process. So that will be what we're looking for to try and help develop in the November workshop, and we'll let you know, say in due course, exactly where that's going to be. But if all else fails, we'll be resorting to Zoom again. So thank you all very much indeed for your time today, and it's lovely to see so many participants. So I hope that's been of use for you. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gillian and Terry and Louise.
Yeah, thank you. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks all.
everyone.
Bye.
Yes, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.